Commerce Alive Today presents
10 even more defunct dead department stores. Felix Fuld, Louis M. Frank, and Louis Bamberger founded and opened the first Bamberger store on December 13, 1892 on 131 Market Street on the corner of Halsey Street in Newark, New Jersey, taking over the location of a bankrupt store Hill Craig. Fuld and Frank were Bamberger's brothers-in-law. Newark, New Jersey was known for manufacturing towards the end of the 19th century. By 1892 Newark, New Jersey was the fourth largest American city and it manufactured products from leather to jewelry along with it being a rail hub. It also had a large Jewish population within the city of Newark, which also led to opening of Bambergers. On October 16, 1912 the company opened its flagship store, designed by Jarvis Hunt, at 131 Market Street in downtown Newark, New Jersey. The historic building once ranked among the nation's largest department stores. After an expansion in 1929 it was the nation's sixth largest department store in the United States. The store had over 200 departments over 9 floors, and 2 basement floors. There was a restaurant on the 10th floor. The layout of the store changed over time, but one layout of floor departments can be seen here. Bamberger's had its own Newark Public Library branch and U.S. Post Office branch. It sold customized linens, engraved jewelry, furs, and specialty items. In June 1929 Bamberger's was purchased by R.H. Macy Company, but the name remained Bamberger's. In the years immediately following World War II, the store was reorganized to become more mainstream. In 1955, the 10th floor restaurant complex was leased to the private Downtown Club. Dining service for customers continued at the Dinette, a counter-style room on the first basement level and snack bars on the first and fourth floors. Eventually the lower-level eatery was remodeled into a restaurant named the Garden State Tea Room. The 1960s and 1970s saw expansion throughout the state of New Jersey and into the greater Philadelphia metropolitan area, and by the 1980s there were branches opened in the Baltimore, Maryland metropolitan area. On October 5, 1986, the Bamberger stores adopted the name Macy's New Jersey, and in 1988 Macy's New Jersey was consolidated with sister division Macy's New York to form Macy's Northeast, now Macy's Incorporated. As northern New Jersey's population grew, Bamberger's followed the suburban population aggressively. Suburban branch stores of L. Bamberger Company were built in other New Jersey locations, downtown Morristown, Plainfield, and at Princeton, New Jersey. According to Greg Hadala, for NJ.com, with the post-World War II population shift towards the suburbs of major cities, Bamberger's built additional stores in locations such as East Brunswick, Garden State Plaza, Livingston Mall, Monmouth Mall, Nanuet Mall, Ocean County Mall, and Menlo Park Mall. In 1970, the East Brunswick location became an anchor store for the Brunswick Square Mall. Sales volume at the downtown Newark, New Jersey store was affected by the Newark civil unrest of 1967. Sales space was decreased and the flagship store in Newark became a value-oriented store. Evening hours were totally eliminated downtown by 1979 due to crime in the city at the time. In 1986, all Bamberger stores were renamed Macy's, and the former flagship store in Newark operated as Macy's until it was closed in 1992. The former flagship store in Newark became 165 Halsey Street and serves the telecommunication, colocation, and computer support industries. Kaufmanns was founded in Pittsburgh in 1871 by brothers Morris, Jacob, and Isaac Kaufmann as a small South Side men's store. In 1877, the brothers moved downtown to a location that became known as the Big Store. In the first half of the 20th century, the store was owned by Edgar J. Kaufmann. For a time, Kaufmann's was one of 7 department stores in downtown Pittsburgh, founded by cousins of the original Kaufmanns, founders Horns, Boggs Buell, Frank Saders, Rosenbaums, and Boggs Buell of Allegheny Center. In 1913, Morris Kaufmann and his son Edgar bought out the other family members and incorporated Kaufmanns. Isaac, Ludwig and Nathan Kaufmann partnered with Morris and Julius Baer to start a new department store, Kaufmann-Baer Company. They built the 13-story, 700,000 square foot building at the corner of 6th and Smithfield in downtown Pittsburgh. The store opened on March 18, 1914, advertising that there was no connection with any other store. On December 2, 1925, Gimbel Brothers purchased Kaufmann-Baer Company, with the store name updated to Gimbel's on January 3, 1928. Baitis Incorporated, a tobacco conglomerate, purchased the entire Gimbel's chain in 1974. In 1986, after years of declining sales, Baitis announced that Gimbel's was for sale. Unable to find a buyer for the entire chain, Baitis closed the unprofitable Gimbel's Pittsburgh division, closing all of its locations and selling the properties, except for some of the high-profit Gimbel's locations in shopping malls rebranded as Kaufmann stores. With Edgar J. Kaufmann remaining as president, the Kaufmann's chain was acquired by the St. Louis, Missouri-based May Company department stores in 1946. The Kaufmann's division operated stores in Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, and West Virginia. The Kaufmann's chain dominated its local region, absorbing several other department stores including Straus in 1986 based in Youngstown, Ohio, Sibley's in 1991 based in Rochester, New York, May Company Ohio in 1992 based in Cleveland, Ohio, which had merged with O'Neill's in 1989 in Akron, Ohio, and in 1995 the remnants of McCurdy's stores of Rochester and Hess's of Allentown, Pennsylvania. In 2002, the Kaufmann store's Pittsburgh business headquarters closed, and its back-office operations were consolidated into those of Fillings department stores in Boston. In 2005, Federated Department Stores Incorporated agreed to buy May Department Stores Company for $11 billion. Following the purchase by Macy's in 2006, USA Today ran an article about the regional chains merging into Macy's, which featured memories from Pittsburgh residents about the store and the clock. As girls in their best dresses and Mary Jane shoes, they rode streetcars downtown to the 11-story Kaufmann's department store here. Jean Wenner, 81, and her friends grew up on Kaufmann's, meeting under the store's ornate clock, lunching at the Tick-Tock restaurant and bringing their own children to the Secret Santa. The Kaufmann's flagship store was rebranded as Macy's after the company acquired Kaufmann's parent company in 2005. Several Kaufmann's holiday traditions continued to prevail after the company was taken over by Macy's, including animated Christmas windows and Santa Land. As of 2006, several Kaufmann's plaques were still visible on the building. English-born Samuel Lord started a dry goods business in New York in 1824 and opened the original store that would become Lord Taylor in 1826, on Catherine Street in what is now Two Bridges, Manhattan. The shop stocked hosiery, Mrs. Ware, and cashmere shawls. His wife's cousin, George Washington Taylor, joined in 1834, and the store was named Lord Taylor. The store continued to grow. It annexed 49 Catherine Street in 1832 and moved 6 years later to 61 to 63 Catherine Street. James S. Taylor, Lord's brother-in-law, replaced George Taylor in 1845. The company erected a new building at Grand and Christie Streets in 1853 and moved into that location the next year. Lord later named his son John T. Lord and his employee John S. Lyle as partners. In 1945, Dorothy Shaver became the first woman to head a major retail establishment in the United States as president of Lord Taylor. Jane T. Elfers became Lord Taylor's second female president in June 2000. Former Neiman Marcus executive, Brendan Hoffman replaced her in October 2008, when Elfier's contract had expired. A third female president, Bonnie Brooks, took over in 2011, and a fourth female president, Liz Rodbell, took over in 2013. Federated Department Stores, now Macy's Inc., acquired May Department Stores on August 30, 2005. Federated announced on March 10, 2006, that 7 conflicting Lord Taylor locations would either close or downscale into Macy's. The legendary Center City, Philadelphia store, former flagship of the John Wanamaker chain, opened after a 1-month renovation as Macy's City Center on August 1, 2006. On June 22, 2006, NRDC Equity Partners, LLC announced it would purchase Lord Taylor for $1.2 billion after Federated converted and closed the 7 locations, the sale completed in October 2006. In May 2019, HBC announced it was seeking strategic alternatives for the Lord Taylor business. In August 2019, the company found a buyer for the chain, Latote Incorporated, for $75 million in cash on closing and an additional $25 million 2 years later. The acquisition was completed in November 2019. During the fall of 2019, full-line store closings were announced in Nyack, New York, Woodbridge, New Jersey, Moorestown, New Jersey, Dulles, Virginia, and McLean, Virginia, and a Find at Lord Taylor outlet was closed in Paramus, New Jersey. In November 2019, the sale to Latote was finalized and it was reported that all 38 remaining Lord Taylor stores would be kept open. Previously, 5 of the 38 stores were to be closed. According to the purchase agreement from HBC. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States in February 2020, Lord Taylor began laying off many workers at stores across all stores in the Northeast and the Midwest, as Latote was beginning to struggle with the fact that they had taken on someone else's problem, and their plan to reinvest in these stores was headed in the wrong direction. Lord Taylor's stores were forced to close due to executive state orders by the local and state governments on non-essential retail by Wednesday, March 18, 2020. On May 5, 2020, it was reported that Lord Taylor was planning to liquidate all stores when they could reopen. But in June, the company said that it intended to reopen all of its locations and began the process of reopening on Friday, May 15, 2020, with all stores resuming operations by July 3, 2020, and files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on August 2, 2020. On Thursday, August 27, 2020, the company announced that it will close all stores, and on February 27, 2021, the remaining 19 stores closed for the final time. The store was founded in 1865 in Brooklyn, New York, as Wexler Abraham by Joseph Wexler and Abraham Abraham. In 1893, the Straus family, including Isidore Straus and Nathan Straus, who acquired a general partnership with Macy's department stores in 1888, bought out Joseph Wexler's interest in Wexler Abraham and changed the store's name to Abraham Straus. While Abraham Straus did not at that time become a part of Macy's, the two stores shared an overseas office and maintained close ties. The first Brooklyn store, at 285 Fulton Street, opened in 1865 and measured 25 feet by 90 feet. Abraham Abraham, age 22, and Joseph Wexler each contributed $5,000 for the purchase. In 1883, the firm bought the recently built Second Empire cast iron Wheeler building at 422 Fulton Street to be their flagship store. At the time, the company had 2,000 employees. Simon F. Rothschild, Abraham's son-in-law, Edward Charles Blum, and son, Lawrence Abraham, became partners in the new firm. By 1900, the company had 4,650 employees. From the 1890s to the 1920s, AS utilized a system of catalog store agencies across Long Island to serve customers. In 1929, the company joined Fillings, Lazarus, and Bloomingdale's to form Federated Department Stores. To economize during the Depression, it began scheduling employees according to hourly sales. In addition, all employees took a 10% pay cut. No employees were laid off. In 1937, Walter N. Rothschild led the company, and served as president and chairman until 1955. Following Rothschild, Sidney L. Solomon became the company's first non-family president. At the time, the company had 12,000 employees. After World War II, the company grew. In 1950, the company purchased Loser's Garden City store, and 2 years later, its first new branch store opened in Hempstead, New York. In the 1970s, Federated attempted to update the image of AS and funded the construction of new, more upscale stores. AS developed a new logo that once again branded the stores Abraham Straus. The company opened a central distribution center which decreased the amount of non-selling space needed in each store. In 1978, the firm opened the first of its more upscale stores at the Monmouth Mall in Eatontown, New Jersey. This was followed by stores in White Plains, New York in 1980, the mall at Short Hills in New Jersey, in 1981, and a replacement for the chain's Babylon, Long Island store at Westfield Sunrise Mall. In 1981 and 1982, the chain opened 2 stores at malls in the suburban Philadelphia market: the Court at King of Prussia and Willow Grove Park Mall. These new stores struggled to find their niche, and the 2 Pennsylvania stores were closed in 1987 and 1988, respectively. In 1994, Federated acquired Macy's. Since both Macy's and AS competed for the same type of middle-income customer, Federated felt that the lesser-known AS brand should be eliminated. In January 1995, it was announced that all AS locations would be converted to other brands by April 30th. Most became Macy's or Stearns, but at least one location was converted to a Bloomingdale's and another was sold to Sears. In 1897, Henry Payne and William M. Burdine opened a dry goods store in the central Florida city of Bartow. A year later, Payne left the company, and Burdine brought in his son, John, as a partner, resulting in the company's name change to W.M. Burdine & Son. In 1898, Burdine bought a block on South Miami Avenue, 1 block south of Flagler Street, in the then-fledgling community of Miami. That year he opened the first W.M. Burdine & Son store at the location, just 2 years after the first people had arrived in the area from the newly completed Florida East Coast Railway to incorporate the city. His tiny store held only a few shelves of clothing, which were primarily sold to construction workers, soldiers from the Spanish-American War, and the local Miccosukee and Seminole Native Americans. Burdine was amazed with the business that he did in Miami and decided to close his store in Bartow and move his operations to Miami, changing the name to Burdines & Sons. William died in 1911, and his other son, Roddy, took over the chain. By then, Burdine had grown into a full-fledged department store and continued expanding. The boom of the 1920s helped the store launch its first branch in Miami Beach. As Florida's population soared, so did the growth of Burdines. Over the next 30 years, 4 branches opened across Florida. In 1956, Burdines merged with Federated Department Stores Incorporated. The financial support given by Federated allowed Burdines to push north and westward in the 1970s and 1980s. In 1971, the Burdines store in Dadeland Mall became the largest suburban department store south of New York. Burdines also piloted auto centers, beginning in 1960, at their 163rd Street location and the Miami warehouse, after testing it in Fort Lauderdale. In 1991, following the 1988 merger of Federated with the Allied Stores Corporation and subsequent bankruptcy reorganization, Burdines absorbed Allied's Tampa-based Moss Brothers/Jordan Marsh Florida division, converting many of the stores to Burdines and closing the rest. The conversion resulted in there being 58 Burdines stores in Florida, more than twice their initial store count of 27. During the 1990s, 11 more stores opened across Florida. From 1999 to 2001, Burdines experienced major growth, expanding into 7 new locations and significantly renovating their existing stores with a lighter color palette and an upgraded decor. The most publicly anticipated stores that opened during this period were those located in expansions of the Florida Mall in Orlando and Aventura Mall in Aventura. While other stores opened with new shopping malls such as Citrus Park Town Center in Citrus Park and the mall at Wellington Green in Wellington. In May 2003, Federated announced plans to convert Burdines to the Macy's nameplate. Beginning in February 2004, Burdines' 56 stores would operate under the name Burdines Macy's. 7 Macy's stores in Florida operated under the dual name as well. At a later date, the stores would be switched to the Macy's name. Since Macy's and Burdines maintained several stores at the same malls, industry specialists speculated that Federated would close some stores or convert them to home furnishing stores. The Hecht Company was founded in 1857 by Sam Hecht, Jr. The Hecht family was Jewish and came from the little village of Langenschwarz, Kreis Hunfeld, Hesse, Germany, where Sam was born on December 10, 1830. His father Meyer Hecht was a cattle dealer who drowned in Langenschwarz on June 12, 1835. Meyer's parents were Anschel Hecht, who was a fur dealer, and Gudene Goldschmidt, who was born in Germany. By 1870, this venture had moved to a more auspicious location at 519 South Broadway, where the name, Hecht's Reliable Stores, could be seen carved in foot-high letters into the granite cornice above the 3rd floor, now demolished. Clothing was added to the lineup in 1879 under the name of Hecht's Reliable. Shortly thereafter, a carpet and matting establishment was opened in Baltimore at 310 West Lexington Street. The growth of the firm continued in Baltimore with the opening of the Hecht Brothers store on Baltimore and Pine Streets in 1885, the Hub store in Baltimore in 1897, and Hecht Brothers at Howard and Franklin Streets in 1926. Hecht stores were also established in New York City and Easton, Maryland. There was also a branch in Annapolis, Maryland. However, the most important move was into Washington, D.C. The Hechts opened a store in Washington on March 20, 1896, which moved to a glass and marble store at the corner of 7th and F Streets Northwest. In Washington, D.C.'s downtown shopping district, in November 1925. Alexander Hecht directed the Washington part of the business for the family. Hecht's was the first store in Washington to offer national brands. It also boasted the first parking garage and first elevator. Its relatively open policies made it popular among African Americans as well as the white populace. In July 1951, a mixed-race group began to picket outside the store, protesting racial segregation in the store's cafeteria. Policy was changed in January of the following year. After World War II, Hecht Company began to build new stores in the suburbs around Baltimore, Maryland and Washington, D.C. Outside the center of Baltimore, Hecht's opened a store in Northwood in September 1954, followed by another in Edmondson Village in October 1956. The Hecht chain was acquired by the May Company in 1959. Other stores acquired later were also rebranded as Hecht's. In 1990, Hecht's acquired 4 Miller Road stores in Virginia. That same year, the May Company acquired the Thalheimer's chain from Carter Hawley Hale stores. The following year it was announced that the Thalheimer stores would be folded under the Hecht's name. When May took over 10 Hess's stores. Based in Allentown, Pennsylvania, 3 of them reopened as Hecht's and the others were operated by corporate siblings Kaufmanns and Fillings. Hecht's acquired Wanamaker's, based in Philadelphia, and Woodward Lothrop, based in Washington, D.C., taking over 17 stores acquired in 1995 in joint acquisition with J.C. Penney. 14 stores were consolidated the same year. 13 of Strawbridge and Clothier's stores, based in the Philadelphia, acquired in 1996. Following the acquisition, SC was renamed Strawbridge's. The May Department Stores Company was acquired by Federated Department Stores on August 30, 2005. On February 1, 2006, and the nameplate was phased out in favor of the nationally known Macy's. In 1841, Eben Dyer Jordan left his job at a Boston dry goods store and went into business for himself, laying the foundation for the first Jordan Marsh. 10 years later, Jordan partnered with Boston merchant Benjamin L. Marsh. They began by selling linen, silk, and other dry goods from Europe to wholesale customers in and around the city. As the business grew, it moved from one location to another, and in 1861 Jordan and Marsh decided to begin selling directly to the public. Eventually the partners had established the nation's first departmentalized store and called it Jordan Marsh and Company. During the second half of the 19th century, Eben Jordan's son, Jordan Jr., and a new partner named George Mitten took over the company, turning it into a modern department store. After World War II, the company began moving into the suburbs. Jordan's constructed its first branch stores in suburban communities in the 1940s, but by 1966 the branch stores accounted for half of all department store sales. The shopping mall Shoppers World opened in Framingham, Massachusetts on October 4, 1951, making it one of the earliest suburban shopping malls ever in the country. Jordan Marsh stood at the southern end as the sole anchor. It was the first mall-style Jordan Marsh in the country and was unmistakable for its large white dome. In 1956, the first store in Miami, Florida was opened. Later, it was divided into a separate division of Allied, then the Jordan Marsh of Boston with headquarters in Miami. Jordan Marsh also opened a San Diego branch around the same time. The branch did not do nearly as well as the Florida branches, and the failed store closed in 1958. The Florida stores were disbanded in 1991, with several being merged with Moss Brothers, which later became Burdines, now Macy's. In 1986, the Canadian Campo Corporation acquired Allied Stores Corporation, which was reorganized under the agreement. In February 1987, Campo merged DM Reed Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut, into Jordan Marsh, and merged Jordan Marsh Florida with Moss Brothers of Tampa, Florida, as the new Moss Brothers/Jordan Marsh Florida division. In 1988, Campo Corporation acquired Federated. To consolidate with Federated, Allied's New York headquarters moved to Cincinnati. Allied stores, the Bon Marché, Jordan Marsh, Moss Brothers/Jordan Marsh Florida and Stearns, operating in tandem with Federated, Bloomingdale's, Abraham Straus, Lazarus, Rich's, Goldsmiths, and Burdines. In 1990, saddled by debt resulting from the highly leveraged Campo takeover of Federated, both Federated and Allied filed for bankruptcy. Campo Corporation U.S., Incorporated, was renamed Federated Stores, Incorporated. The operations of Jordan Marsh Florida and Moss Brothers were absorbed by Burdines in 1991. In 1992, a new public company, Federated Department Stores, Incorporated, emerged in February. The former Allied Stores Corporation was merged into Federated. A consolidation of the AS and Jordan Marsh divisions resulted in the AS/Jordan Marsh division. In 1996, Jordan Marsh stores in the Northeast U.S., already part of the Macy's East Division, were converted to the Macy's nameplate. The retailer began in Atlanta as M. Rich Company, a dry goods store, on May 28, 1867, at 36 Whitehall Street. The sole proprietor was Mauritius Reich, a Hungarian Jewish immigrant. It was renamed M. Rich Bro in 1877, when Morris and brother Emmanuel formed a partnership. In 1884, when the third brother Daniel was admitted into the partnership, the name became M. Rich Brothers. With business success came a need for expansion, and the store was moved to ever larger locations, in July 1875 to 35 Whitehall, in September 1875 to 43 Whitehall, in October 1875 to 65 Whitehall, at the corner of M. L. King Boulevard, and in September 1882 to 54 to 56 Whitehall. In 1901 Rich's became a true department store when they divided like merchandise into separated sections. The company was incorporated as M. Rich Brothers Company. In 1906, the adjacent M. Cutts Company building at 52 Whitehall was acquired. Both it and 54 to 56 Whitehall were torn down. Rich's closed its furniture annex and moved its dry goods to that building, until a new building could be built on the site of 52-54-56 Whitehall. In April 1907 the new Emporium opened for business. That building is still standing, known as the M. Rich and Brothers and Company Building. Daniel's son Walter Rich succeeded his uncle Morris as Rich's president from 1926 to 1947. The grandson of Morris Rich, Richard H. Rich, took over the store in 1949. Under the leadership of Richard Rich, Rich's began expansion in the 1950s. Rich's moved outside the Atlanta area for its first new store in 1955 when a store in Knoxville, Tennessee was opened. Rich's opened its first suburban store at Lenox Square in 1959. That same year Rich's also opened a store at Belvedere Plaza Shopping Center, in Belvedere Park near Decatur. Rich's sold off its Knoxville store to Miller's when profits fell off. The sale to Federated in 1976 ended over 100 years of ownership by the Rich family. Aside from the Great Tree, most of the traditions of Rich's and the departments were stripped away by the early 1990s. Loyalty to the chain, however, remained very strong. In 1994, the parent company of Rich's bought out Macy's, which was historically Atlanta's rival chain under the Davison's banner. The following year, Rich's was merged with Lazarus in the Midwest and Goldsmiths in Memphis. Through the merged division, the chain grew in a corporate sense as it was operated out of Atlanta, but the Lazarus and Goldsmith stores continued to operate under their regional names. The merger with Goldsmiths occurred in 1988 and Lazarus in 1995. When Rich's and Macy's both were owned by the same company, this resulted in the overlapping of the two chains all selling the same products. Initially, both stores remained open with Macy's losing its higher-end merchandise and becoming distinctly down-market when compared with Rich's. The decision was made in 2003 to close all of the former Davison's/Macy's stores in Atlanta and co-brand Rich's as Rich's Macy's. As Macy's was a well-known part of the Atlanta retail landscape since its purchase of Davison's in the 1920s, loyal Rich's customers who defected to other stores were replaced by longtime Macy's/Davison's customers. After 138 years, Rich's and later as Rich's Macy's brand disappeared on March 6, 2005 when it was rebranded as Macy's. The Bon Ton was started in 1898, when Max Grumbacher and his father, Samuel, opened S. Grumbacher Son, a one-room millinery and dry goods store on Market Street in York, Pennsylvania. As reported in the Carlisle Evening Sentinel on October 31, 1902, the store chain had two additional locations under the name Bon Ton Millinery in Trenton, New Jersey, as well as in the following 5 Pennsylvania locations. Through World War I and the Roaring Twenties, the Grumbacher store chain grew bigger and, in 1929, the company was incorporated as S. Grumbacher Son Incorporated. In 1931, Max's son, Max Samuel, joined the company. When Max the Elder died in 1933, his widow, Daisy, and their 2 sons, MS and Richard, continued the business, forming a partnership in 1936. Following World War II, the Grumbacher family decided to expand operations further. In 1946, an additional Bon Ton was opened, in Hanover, Pennsylvania. 2 years later, the company moved outside Pennsylvania, acquiring Irelees in Hagerstown, Maryland, and, in 1957, purchasing McMeans in Lewistown, Pennsylvania. These moves set the Bon-Ton's policy of growing into adjacent areas by opening new stores and acquiring existing businesses. During the next 3 decades, the Bon-Ton stores continued to expand. During the 1960s, the company opened new Irelees and Bon-Ton stores in several Pennsylvania communities and one in West Virginia. In 1969, retired the McMeans name. During the 1970s, the Bon-Ton opened 11 new stores in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. The 1980s formed a period of rapid consolidation in the retail department store industry as major chains bought their competitors. The Bon-Ton stores began the decade by opening more stores, Maxwell's, and acquiring L.S. Good, including its Fowler's department stores, 2 years later buying the 11-store Pomeroy's chain from Allied. In 1991. In July 1994, the Bon-Ton purchased the 127-year-old Adam, Meldrum, and Anderson Company chain based in Buffalo, New York, for $42.6 million, converting all locations to the Bon-Ton. Around the same time, the Bon-Ton also purchased Chappelle's of Syracuse, New York, and Hess's of Allentown, Pennsylvania. The Bon-Ton initially retained and operated Hess's flagship location until 1996, when it closed after nearly 100 years of continuous operation. Its Allentown store, the Bon-Ton entered the Rochester, New York market in 3 former McCurdy's locations. In March 1995, Bon-Ton closed the Lancaster store. The Bon-Ton store's chain size doubled in November 2005 with the $1 billion purchase of Saks Northern Department Store Group. Corporate headquarters were relocated to Milwaukee. As with the acquisition, no store names were changed. The newly acquired store group included Carson Pirie Scott, Bergner's, Boston Store, Herberger's, and Yonkers. In September 2006, the Bon-Ton purchased 4 former Parisian stores from Belk. The stores were located in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. The stores in Indiana and Ohio were immediately rebranded to Carson Pirie Scott and Elder Beerman, respectively. The Bon-Ton's final years were marked with a string of losses and turnover. From 2011 through 2017, the company did not post a profit. From 2011 through the bankruptcy, the stock was delisted on December 6. In November 2017, 45 stores would close after the holiday season, and in February 2018, it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, liquidating all 267 stores after the Great American Group LLC and Tiger Capital Group LLC bid $775.5 million for the retailer and after converting the bankruptcy to Chapter 7. On August 30, all locations were officially closed. The chain was founded in 1904 by Emil Gottschalk in Fresno, California. Over half a century passed before the company opened its first branch store in 1961. It was around this time that grandnephew Irving Levy, whose father had helped found the company. In an effort to win over teenage baby boomers, Gottschalks launched Bobby West, a chain of junior apparel stores, in the late 1960s. Village East shops, which offered large-sized women's clothing, were launched in 1970. Irving Levy served as president until his death in 1980, guiding Gottschalk's growth into a chain of 6 department stores and over a dozen boutiques with over $80 million in annual sales. That's when Gerald Blum assumed the presidency. Blum advanced to vice chairman and consultant in 1982. Gottschalks went public in 1986, selling about 50% of its equity on the New York Stock Exchange. The proceeds were used to step up the pace of new store acquisition and construction, helping to make Gottschalks California's fastest-growing department store chain in the late 1980s. The number of Gottschalks units doubled from 9 in 1985 to 18 in 1988, and annual revenues increased from $112 million to $196 million in the process. Part of this growth came via the acquisition of 2 department store chains in 1987 and 1988. Totaling $11 million, the purchases of the privately held Malcolm Brock and Samuel Leask Sons chains added 5 stores. The chain also refined its store offerings, converting its Bobby West Jr. stores into Petite West boutiques mid-decade in order to attract smaller-sized Asian and Latin women. Although Gottschalks sales increased from $287 million in 1990 to over $400 million in 1995, it had a cumulative net loss over those 6 fiscal years of $4.9 million. Gottschalks planned to employ 4 basic strategies in an effort to revisit the glory days of the 1980s. The company sought improvements in year-over-year store performance, focusing especially on 2 underperforming stores. Gottschalks also hoped to lessen its overhead through layoffs at administrative levels, outsourcing, contract renegotiations, and paring of some optional expenses. The company planned to increase income by upping finance and service charges on its store credit card and to enhance cash flow by curtailing capital outlays. They also went online that same year. Most of the Le Mans locations that were acquired by Gottschalks eventually closed due to poor sales. On October 24, 2008, Gottschalks was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. NYSE officials stated that the value of the stock was too low to continue to be listed. On January 14, 2009, Gottschalks filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In March 2009, Gottschalks announced it lined up a group of bidders that would liquidate the chain if no other bidder was found by March 30. On March 31, Gottschalks announced it would liquidate its remaining stores. The chain's final stores closed July 12, 2009.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.